you're not just doing solely food photography or something like that. Like, I was shooting weddings. You kind of have to be comfortable shooting people to a certain degree, whether you're liking it or not.
Hey, photo BFFs. Welcome back to another episode of the Edit Weekly. I am Amanda from Seattle.
And I'm Erin from Nashville.
And today we have a super fabulous guest on. I say that because she and I have known each other since we were 8 years old. And we both ended up in the photography world, which I think is just super amazing. I think we both just wanted to be artists, and go figure, we both ended up being photographers. So Charity Burggraaf is a culinary photographer here in the Pacific Northwest, where I am based as well. She used to be just a hop, skip, and a jump away from me, but she moved up north like 2 years ago. So we're a little bit farther apart. So it's fun to be able to have her on today to talk more about being a culinary photographer. So welcome, Charity.
Hi, thanks. This is fun.
So tell everybody about your path to becoming a culinary photographer.
Oh, so, well, yeah, you've touched on it a little, because it was just being an art geek in high school, right? So a lot of it was just wanting to create and falling into photography with my dad doing photography. And so, sorry, now I'm getting nervous. I pursued photography from high school. And so I went into a college program in Seattle called Seattle Central Creative Academy that had a commercial photography degree. And that was like a long, winding process finding that road. But essentially, to narrow it down a little bit, this commercial photography program had us kind of find a niche. And this was back in 2004, 2005, somewhere in there. So this was not Instagram time. This was not food photography is so cool time. I did not want to do food photography. It did not seem like a cool thing to do. I wanted to do film. But I was very shy and did not particularly like photographing people. So I found my solace in this little world of food photography when we had an assignment to do so. And just kind of fell in love with it because it was creating art for a page kind of thing. So I focused on that and graduated with a food photography portfolio, and went off and did that in Seattle and otherwise. So, but yeah, it was a time when there wasn't really much of a prospect for food photography. Even the idea of working in food photography solely in Seattle in that market back then was insane, because it was you had to do all these other things to make a profit as a photographer. And it's changed a lot thanks to Instagram and frankly, like, bigger companies that came through Seattle at that time and made the economy what it was. But yeah, it was not a career path at the time. When I first started, it was working at Seattle Magazine, that was like the epitome, but then you also had to work at studios and do clothing brands and, all these other things. So
yeah, stuff that you didn't particularly love. I very much remember this time. I mean, that's the fun thing about interviewing you, is since we've known each other, for all these years. Like, I remember when Charity had to do like one of the portrait parts of her class. I came in and posed for her. I have many really fun portraits of her.
You were my first subject in high school.
There we go. That is true in high school. Well, gosh, even in like elementary school, Erin knows all about my like neon pink Kodak camera. But yeah, Charity and I would like take each other's portraits, and gosh, I feel like even junior high we were not like officially doing it, but like one of us had a camera with us like all the time.
Looked it up beforehand and brought it. I'm sure it's in a box, but there is a photo of us taking a selfie when we were 8, 9.
Oh my gosh, I want you to find that.
And it's truly us, like, taking a picture of each other in a mirror, making faces, and it's.
Oh my gosh,
I mean,
that's fabulous.
about,
I think I actually know which picture you're talking about now that you mentioned that. So.
So, you know, we've been into other subjects for a while, but
Yeah, for a long time.
barring like you or like, you know, like a few friends, like taking pictures of people was awful.
Which is like the perfect segue into my next question for you.
I know.
Yeah, like that's the thing is so, and I know that like you've always been somebody who, I mean, you just have such an eye for it. But I understand where you're coming from. I know you so well that yeah, it definitely seemed like photographing people was not always your thing. But obviously, specializing in food photography, chefs are an enormous part of that industry. So, how did you get comfortable photographing people?
It's a mixed bag. So there are multiple answers to this. A lot of it came from just doing and pushing, and you know, like kind of pushing through the anxieties of it. You know, starting out, like I said, like you're not just doing solely food photography or something like that. Like I was shooting weddings. I was, you know, shooting.
Charity and I photographed some weddings together, actually.
Yeah.
So there we go.
So like you kind of have to be comfortable shooting people to a certain degree, whether you're, you know, liking it or not. But and I even like pushed myself. Like I went to Paris and I had to take pictures of people I couldn't even speak the same language of, you know, like, so it's these breaking barriers that you start to learn different like ways to communicate, and it helps you because you have to be out of your comfort zone to make those things happen. But I think one of the biggest breakthroughs, and it was well into my career because I had to shoot people and chefs and things for all sorts of editorial things. But I had a book, I think it was in 2018, where I had to photograph like it was Seattle chefs, and so I had to photograph 40 chefs in the studio, and you know,
That is
like
so many people,
like portrait scenario, you know, and I was terrified, and it's not because it was like not something I hadn't done before, but I think because it wasn't in their environment, so I had to create this idea, like this environment, this feeling, and so I watched. I'm gonna forget her name. Victoria. She did a Creative Live episode about photographing people, and it was she's a celebrity photographer, and so she had all these stories about different celebrities she's shot before, and she went through a demo and showed like what her process was, and it was eye-opening because it felt like it was already my process. In that it was very like, just keep them moving, just you know, set up a light and keep them busy, keep them active, you know. And so it not only did it give me pointers about, you know, the best lighting or interesting lighting and all this, but then it also gave me pointers of what I was doing right and also what I could refine. And it was it just really like opened my eyes to like kind of letting go of those anxieties of like, we're all just making it happen the way that we can. And as long as we keep the person in front of the camera comfortable, then we're fine. Yeah. So it was a good experience. And then, going through those portraits in the studio was also a really good way to like kind of just like, okay, we got this. We're good.
You can do this.
We can do this. And
a little pep talk to yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worked for a lot of things.
Could you tell me, as a food photographer, because this is a totally different world for me, and I've seen your Instagram, and it's so beautiful, and I'm going to come back and comment on that. But What do your days look like? What is a week or a month or what kind of projects are you doing as a food photographer?
Oh, a lot of the stuff I do now are kind of bigger projects. So, are bigger in that a lot of books. So they take up a lot more planning time, and then like a book will usually take anywhere from like 2 to 3 weeks to photograph, kind of thing. A lot of my workload is at, in the office, organizing, planning, hiring people, at times choosing props, setting up studios, making sure that the food stylist has everything they need to get the food in order and all that fun jazz. Um, and then like kind of, setting up shot lists and setting up what each shot's going to look like to a certain degree, and all that fun, all the logistics. But then when we get there and we get into the studio, it's from like probably 7 to 7 shooting food, probably eight, about 8 to 10 dishes a day, for a cookbook, which is a lot for a commercial. So don't quote me on that for commercial work. But for a cookbook, that's about that. So it's just a lot of putting that all together. But yeah, it's a lot of planning, like a lot of planning before the thing.
Oh, which, I mean, that totally makes sense, especially when you're doing something like a cookbook where I feel like there's a lot more structure to something like that. And there has to be, because you've got a team of people and you all have to be on the same page, and you're trying to use your time as wisely as possible.
Yes.
With that, because, you do only have a set amount of time. I know when you're doing shoots like these, which kind of brings me into my next question for you about when you are planning, for photographing a chef, when you are doing these, do you have portraits in mind then ahead of time, like through your planning process, or do you end up kind of doing more on the fly? Like what's your process, I guess, for chef? Because a lot of our audience, they're going to probably be portrait. I feel like a lot of our audience is portrait photographers. So I want to kind of speak to something that they might be able to resonate with, like where your process is for photographing the people and the chefs that you would be working with.
I'd say a large majority, especially with chefs for editorial purposes, like if it's a magazine assignment, or even like if I'm hired by the restaurant to come in and photograph them, a lot of that's on the fly. If I know the restaurant already, I can maybe start thinking about where it might be best. But like, let's, for example, say that it's like someone I've never met before. I maybe like Google image search the restaurant as a whole, just to kind of get an idea of the lighting, and all that. But generally speaking, I kind of wait to meet the chef, to see what I think they're going to be up for, and see what their personality is, in terms of what maybe speaks best to them, for the photo. Because, some chefs, all they want to do is like, and I don't want to generalize this because it doesn't happen that often, but every once in a while you'll get a chef where it just seems like all they really want to do is pose the chef pose, like they just want to be in front of the kitchen. They just want to have their arms crossed, and that's it. Like, no muss, no fuss. And then there's also, and this happens a lot more now because of, it is becoming a bigger industry, or it has been a bigger industry now, is that they want to do something fun or different, and so you just kind of have to be flexible with that. And so you go in really loose about what to expect. Because if I come in with too many ideas, or too much rigidness, then they're gonna, it's gonna flop. So yeah. So
I think you hit the nail on the head as far as like getting there and figuring out their vibe, you know, because if you don't know them and you're thinking, okay, we're going to go in and we're going to do something super fun. So I've scrolled through your Instagram and there's what I'm actually looking at it right now, the paper cake shop. I hope we can name drop.
Yeah.
That shoot is so much fun. And then there's another chef that's sitting at a table making eye contact, and it's like you just want to go sit down with her and visit. And then there's just for each chef or group of chefs that I see, there's a totally different vibe. And like
Yeah.
maybe you would have went in with the wrong idea of what they connect with. So I think, you got to be, you don't want to be too rigid. I think you hit the nail on the head with matching their personality for sure.
Yeah. And it's just, and exactly. And it definitely like just helps. I mean, that's something you start to learn how to read people, right? And which is what we do just in general, like as people, but it's a sense of, what am I trying to think of? Just intuition, I suppose, or, communication that you want to be able to translate. And I think the thing too is I don't want to impose my perspective of the person fully onto the image when it's it's them, it's them, it's not about me kind of thing. So it's trying to find their personality to dictate the photo a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Isn't that such an interesting thought? I've been doing this for 14 years and I don't know that I've ever really thought twice about how we don't know a lot of the people stepping in front of our cameras.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know which dad is the silly dad or which dad's the more serious dad, or I do a lot of senior portraits. So which girl has more of a silly personality or is more shy, and you figure that stuff out quickly, but then you have to be prepared to work with that. Right. And I guess it just becomes second nature, but I've not thought that much about how, as a photographer, you do need to be able to sort of quickly read people and then roll with however, whatever that is.
Yep. Completely. Whatever it is they give you.
Yeah.
Like a whole other conversation sometime. Amanda, write that down.
Right, exactly. Whitney's going to be editing this. Whitney, take notes.
Yeah.
We should have a psychologist on. There we go. We'll have a psychologist on, and then we could totally delve deep into having to figure this all out really quickly on the fly, reading people and how we do it.
Yeah, truly.
Especially if you're like Charity and you don't really want to work with people.
Exactly. And then you end up, there you go. Yeah. And then you end up photographing celebrities and like James Beard winning like chefs. So there you go.
She has not talked herself up yet, but I'm very impressed with the people and the books and the things that I've seen.
I know listeners need to like go check out Charity's feed and see just how many amazing, like literally award-winning chefs and celebrities Charity has photographed because of their different like side ventures, really. Like, I just think it's like one of the coolest things. And I'm going to just go into a story real quick. Because I'm going to name drop, but only because I think that it's fun because of where we live. So Charity and I, like having grown up in the Seattle area, Dave Matthews is from here, and we have seen him. I don't even know how many times, like at like one of the local coffee shops. Well, my run club used to like go to this place called Zoka, and he was always there. And you would just see him like, oh, there's Dave Matthews just ordering his coffee. No big deal. Like, there he is. And everybody kind of like pretends to like not know who he is, but they all know who he is, which is really funny. Like, we'll walk around Green Lake and we've seen him there too. But Charity just got done photographing like for him in one of his wines. And I'm like, oh, how fun. And I'm sure I'm going to like see Dave Matthews the next time I go into Seattle, because I swear I do pretty much every time. And that's what's going to be on my brain is like, oh, hey, my friend photographed you. But yeah, I mean, like, speaking of, photographing him and other people, you have been like around like the US, around the world. You mentioned Paris. You photographed a cookbook for Five Mary's Farm in California. You did Natasha's Kitchen of YouTube fame over at her place in Idaho. So you've gone all over. How did you end up into kind of this world of cookbooks, if you will? Because I feel like when, you definitely did magazine stuff
Yes.
a lot when you were done. But then I felt like all of a sudden you were like, oh, I'm doing this cookbook and oh, I'm going to do this. And all of a sudden it was just like Charity has a million cookbooks that she is doing. So how did
Yeah.
that come about?
So here's the joke.
We're laughing already.
You're laughing already. Twitter.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's not what I thought you'd say.
Yep. So, back in 2011, watching a Creative Live video, I tweeted a quote from this Creative Live video that I was watching at the time that was about food photography. Penny de los Santos, I believe I'm saying her name right. She had a fantastic Creative Live session back then, and has since. And she was just, it was, I was jokingly to friends saying like it was like watching the Super Bowl for food photography, like just like watching her do her process, and it was like, yeah, oh, she got it, kind of thing. But at any rate, she at the end had a really heartfelt speech, and I pulled a quote and tweeted it out back in 2011. And somebody I knew retweeted it, and the editor of Sasquatch Books saw it and followed the rabbit hole of going to my website and reached out to me because they had a book that they needed a photographer for, and that, the rest was history, kind of thing. So I did that first book, and became really close with that team. I've been working with Sasquatch ever since then. And that editor has since moved on to larger publishers and has some really amazing contacts. And so I've worked closely with her. I call her my fairy godmother. So
I love that.
She's been a godsend to me and has really believed in me for longer than I believed in myself. So, I am very indebted to her. Her name is Susan Roxborough, so got to give her credit.
I love it. Got to give Susan a shout out.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyway, so she is a fantastic person in my life, and started me on cookbooks. And so I've been doing them ever since, and have worked on books. I mean, even outside of her, like just in terms of like, other entities have found me through, my website and ever since then. So worked with chefs on their books, and there are small publishers out there and big publishers, what have you. And yeah, so it's been, it was the biggest goal of mine was to shoot books. And so that's what I do.
Insert applause here.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's
Go
fun.
Twitter.
It's very fun. Yeah. And Twitter. It was, I'm not on Twitter anymore, but, but
how about that connection? Our last episode, our final episode of season 1 we had briefly touched on networking and like just the power of connecting with people and building your business, growing your business that way.
Mm-hmm.
You shared something and a friend shared something, and there you go. And I love it so much. And you probably couldn't have written that if you wanted to. It just, you would have never predicted. But how fun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, Twitter of all places. But it makes sense. I mean, now especially, but yeah, at the time it was, we were, So yeah, networking is huge, especially with our industry, and especially with food photography. You really have to connect, with people.
Yeah.
Which is,
I know that a lot of portrait photographers like Erin and myself, I think a lot of us rely on word of mouth marketing. Does that exist? I mean, obviously with Susan, she is your word of mouth, but does word of mouth exist within like the chef community? Like would a chef you've worked with, has that ever happened? How does that, since I don't know that side of things for culinary photography?
It definitely is a big piece. I mean, you realize more and more, like, and this is true for all of our industries that are photography related, but also food related. Like the uh, the chef world is small, and so it does like everyone knows each other to a certain degree, and some of them actually really know each other, and so that word of mouth is paramount, and then same goes for the food photography industry. Like I was just recently on a shoot in New York, and I've never worked in New York before, on a book project, like a big project, and it was amazing how much we all knew the same people, even though we've never worked together before, so, and it was like we're on first name basis with people, and so it's a small industry, and there's only so many of us, so
Yeah.
so it's very much word of mouth, and yeah, keeping ties. But yeah, see, the chef world is the same. So if one chef could easily be like, hey, I just worked with this awesome photographer, you should get in touch with her, kind of thing. So, or there's also some chefs that, I mean, I shouldn't say this fully, but like there's some chefs that like, you're my photographer, don't be theirs, because of the certain like a style, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I've had that where it's like, you're using this dish and I don't want them to use that dish, like the prop, because it's their look, So
Well, bring your own dish next time. No, I'm kidding.
Well, and yeah, it's just, it's a whole
That's why
thing.
you don't like working with people.
Right.
There we go. Exactly. It's because we all have opinions.
Yeah.
Food's easier to
Who
deal
doesn't
with.
talk back?
Yeah. It's just a calling card thing. And it's
Yeah.
very rare, but I've heard.
But I can see that happening though, especially, I think about even like branding photography in general. Like, I mean, this is gonna air in the fall, so I don't know if this will be old news by then, but like Sabrina Carpenter just like borrowed inspiration, if you will, from her from like her album cover from this like French gosh, I don't remember if it was Vogue, but when it like basically a French magazine like did this picture, and Sabrina Carpenter basically like got her inspiration from it. And so there's been all this heat around like, oh my gosh, she basically like took that photo and just did it herself. And so there was like this whole thing about like, I think it always brings up, this happens a lot anyway, but it brings up just all these different ideas and thoughts about who owns what ideas, and what things are ours, what things are inspiration, what are blatant ripoffs. So I can see how if somebody, especially a chef, really loves an image that you've done, and there is like a maybe unique dish or a prop you've used in that, and they're like, no that's like that's mine, I want that for it. Right. So it's just brings that on. That's a whole nother episode too, right? For the podcast about things like that.
Well, and it seems like with Sabrina Carpenter, like that's not really her fault, that's her people's fault.
Right, exactly. I know. Of course, she obviously is gonna be the one that's under fire for it. Which again, brings into the whole thing about maybe your team should like research a little bit more, or maybe do something. Anyways. Right. Okay, I'm gonna bring us back to, I know that you talked about books were your thing that you've wanted to do, and you've done that. You also though photograph, I mean, you photograph for a ton of magazines, but one of the ones that you're still very actively photographing for is Art Culinaire magazine. So I wanted you to just briefly talk about the work that you do with them and how that kind of differs maybe from a book project.
Yeah, so very much so. So it's a very different, it's more editorial, right? So it's a very different way of doing things. Instead of having 2-3 weeks to like create a story, you have maybe 4 hours to create a story, Art Culinaire. So I started working with Art Culinaire back in 2010, 2011. So kind of around the same time I started doing books. And they are also a fairy godmother to me. They brought me on, and I got an email from them about doing these 3 assignments back then with chefs that I wanted access to, basically. They are I didn't know it at the time, but Art Culinaire is a highly acclaimed periodical for chefs. Some of the biggest names, Thomas Keller collects their issues. Like all these huge chefs love Art Culinaire, and every chef I've ever met tells me when I'm shooting them, this has been my dream to be in Art Culinaire. Like this is what when I started becoming, wanting to be a chef, this is what I wanted to be in Art Culinaire. So it's a huge, huge thing. They're also now in the Smithsonian. Like it's part of the National Library, which is awesome.
So cool.
Yeah.
So cool.
But at any rate, the other story of, getting into this world is that I was pitched this assignment while I was working at this studio in Seattle, hating my life because I was just a photo assistant and I didn't really want to do it. And I got this assignment and I had to reach out to and this is like a big no-no, but I had to reach out to the producer of the studio and say, I know I'm on hold for next week, but I have to release that hold. And she was like, you're dead to me. I got a huge talking to, but you know what? It was worth it.
Yeah, 100%. Best decision ever.
Because it took me on a wild ride of working not only with Art Culinaire, but with all these other chefs. And it built my career. And so taking that risk of saying I can't do this to a pretty decently paying studio job catapulted me into a different world. And so although I don't advise cutting your holds that you have with big studios, sometimes
at the same time. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like Erin and Winnie and I have talked about this where some things come up and you just know, like you just have this like feeling where you're like, I don't care that this is maybe something I shouldn't be doing. Like Erin has talked about like a unicorn job that she had that she gave up because it was just, it didn't serve her in the way. And then, led to even greater things. And you can't say yes to the things you want to do if you're not saying no to the things you don't.
Yeah, exactly.
So I feel like this just very much also solidifies that. And trusting your gut, I feel like is also a thing too. Like your body tells you. Totally. It really does.
Yeah.
When you are done and you hate something and you just want to be moving on. And when you're presented with an amazing opportunity, like how wonderful that you listened to yourself and didn't quiet down your voice and just did it.
Yeah. Yeah. So in Art Culinaire, so you basically, if there's a chef in the area of my region, so like Pacific Northwest area generally. So I've gone to like Montana and Vancouver and Oregon and Seattle, or like outskirts of Seattle. They call me. So, and actually they wanted me to go to Toronto and I couldn't go to Toronto, but anyway.
Bummer. That would have been super fun.
It would have been really fun, but at the time it didn't quite work out. But at any rate, it's just an amazing husband-wife team. We go to these like critically acclaimed, generally James Beard award-winning or up-and-coming chefs that become James Beard award winners, and they do a story about them, and we photograph about 8 dishes and them in the kitchen, their team, and portraits of them, and it's pretty. It's a busy day, but everyone's super jazzed to be a part of it, and it's always just kind of a fun thing to exercise in terms of like working on the fly, because you just don't really know what you're going to get. And there's also, to a certain degree, there's a certain vibe to Art Culinaire that you kind of try to keep to in terms of the refinement of it. But they're branching out as much as everything else is, and so you kind of just put your own spin on it, in terms of the look and feel of the photos, and depending on the chef and all that. Like one of the very first that very first assignment was a trio of chefs, like 3 chefs in Seattle, or outside of Seattle, and I didn't realize at the time, but they were all going to be in the same article. And when we did the first shot, our first shoot, it was up in the island. I'll stop there.
Yep.
And I was shooting natural light, and I shot it in this way that I was kind of my style, my vibe. And then we went down to, at the time, the chef, Canlis, which is a fancy restaurant in Seattle.
It's wonderful.
And he
so
wanted,
amazing.
and he wanted a very different look. Like he wanted very bright white flash, kind of thing. So when I went down to photograph his space after going up to Lummi, I realized that the 2 photos looked so different from each other that I was doing a disservice to the chef up in Lummi, because it just looked like 2 different photographers that just shot this assignment. And so I went up and I reached out to the chef up in Lummi and said, hey, like, I'd love to come up and shoot a couple more if I can, just to like refine this look a little bit more, so you guys don't look so different. And that was actually a connection too, where me reaching out, being like, I want to come up and fix this on my own. He was like, I like you.
That's my favorite thing you've said so far. I love that so much.
And so I started working with him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so he took me on as his photographer. Maybe I said that weird, but took me on as his photographer. And just in terms, and then I say that because it was like, anytime someone reaches out, I'm going to tell them that you have to be the photographer for this, assignment kind of thing. So I got a lot of assignments through that chef because of just showing dedication, I suppose. But so art culinary definitely has given me a lot of access and just a lot of ways to refine my skills and refine how I approach assignments like that, both in time management and also in, kind of like what we were talking about before, like not having a predisposed idea, but whatever. Yeah. Just having it be more articulated, I suppose. I don't know.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. And have them kind of lead it too. And you just kind of, you're there and you can read off of what they're giving you. And then you can do what you need to do that's going to fit with the assignment and also fit with what the chef wants to. Totally. I definitely think that there is, really, anytime you're photographing people, that is so much. I think the thing is that a lot of times, at least when I first started, I would look to inspiration in magazines, and Pinterest wasn't really around, but now it'd be like Pinterest, and you kind of like get these ideas in your head and you would try to do them and it wouldn't fit. Like I definitely remember trying to pose some people in a way and being like, this isn't working. Like I really want to make this happen because I like this image that I saw, but it just isn't working for these people. And so being able to be flexible, I think, is a thing that you learn as you're becoming a photographer. It's not something that they teach you because I feel like you can't really be taught that. You very much learn it. And then you kind of have to embrace this, a little bit of chaos and embrace the unknown. And you could go in with a plan, but just know that plan may just be demolished and not happen at all. So it's really fascinating. This is another reason why I wanted to have you on this show, Charity, is that even though you're in a different photography world than most of our listeners, there are so many parallels because again, you're working with people. And that is really what it comes down to is how you work your business when your clients are people and you need to produce portraits and great images of people and how you work with that. So I've learned a lot about you, even though I've known you forever. I have never actually specifically sat down and asked you all these questions about. I just have been sitting alongside watching it all happen. So this has been fun. And I get to learn one more thing about you because our last question
Oh
that we
God.
Wait, I
always
have a
ask.
question too. I know you
Oh,
just
you
said
do?
last
Okay.
question.
Yeah.
I
No,
mean, I
Erin, you
have
asked
so
the first
many,
time.
Amanda. I have so many questions I could ask right now.
Go for it.
So one, do you ever get to eat any of the food? And are you a foodie, or is this stuff not appealing? Like, do you have it? Are you like
Oh my gosh, I
vegan?
love
Or
this
do
question,
you have a
Erin. I
dairy
love that you
allergy? I
asked
have
this.
to know if you eat the food.
Oh yeah. No, so yes. Yes. The answer is yes. Almost all the food. I know everyone asks, like, is the food real? Like, do you put like gasoline on it? Like what's
Oh, right.
glycerin? No, we don't do it. It's all edible. Usually we have more food than we can actually eat. And but yes, all the food is real. I do eat it. I do not have any allergies, which is helpful.
Yeah.
um,
There's a
uh,
photo of fish and I don't know what else. And I was like, I'm not a fish person. And I was looking at that thinking, I wonder if she's actually there's a few. But there's one on here, seasonal bounty, for the magazine that you were just discussing
oh
with
yeah.
some fish. And I'm like, oh, that would not have been fun for me to photograph with all sorts of sea creatures.
Oh yeah, the cover. Yeah. No,
Yeah. Oh,
for
here,
sure.
we'll just flip it around. We'll just let everybody
There we
see
go.
what we're.
Perfect. I love it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
feel like
being
Charity's
from
like my
Seattle.
only, I feel like one of my only friends that ever really liked seafood. As far as like she and I, it was like we would always go and get seafood because so many other friends that I had wouldn't really eat it. So Charity, like, I can at least answer that one. Is Charity like seafood?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I could have done that shoot, but you killed it.
Oh yeah. Thanks.
Not the
Yeah.
fish, but the shoot.
Yeah. No, it's super fun, and yeah, I love seafood. I could eat that. We would go on field trips the Seattle Center, and I would
Oh
order
yeah.
like half like a pound of clams or something
Oh,
just to eat
totally.
for
Oh
lunch.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yep.
this is just side.
And not really a question, but I just wanted to say your color and your tones, I mean everything, exposure, color, all of it is so beautiful in every single photo. I feel like I could grab a fork and dig right into these photos. A lot of it appears, I'm wondering if you get that with artificial light, does that help with getting more true tones and colors and whatnot?
I would say yes. I started using strobe or artificial light back in like almost um, completely like because I started as a natural light photographer and I swore by it for years and which is silly because I went through the commercial photography program and you learn on lights, like that's the whole point. That's why I went into that program to begin with. But then as a food photographer, like you're all about one light, and it might as well be the sun, and all this. But and it served me well for a while. And then Seattle is notoriously dark
Oh
and
yeah.
rainy, and you start getting assignments for hotels or restaurants that don't have good windows or is in November. And
Mhm.
suddenly you're SOL, like it's not
Mhm.
Yeah.
a good environment to be in. So I invested in some strobes and kind of didn't turn back, like to the point now where I shoot natural light. I'm just like, oh, like what is that? uh, and I still try, but it not that strobes become a crutch, but it's easier to manipulate. You can create a sunlight with strobe enough that you don't have to hurt. Like it was a time when it was like, okay, is the food ready? Because the sun's moving, and you're like in this
Mhm.
battle between the
Excellent
ready of the
point.
food and the sunshine, and if you get that sparkle or if it's gone, and all this.
Yep.
So yeah, so I do highly recommend strobes for for photography to keep that consistency and to have that control.
Yeah.
I think it makes a big difference. And with food photography too, like you're saying with the color is, I have to color by number. So I color correct every image and make sure that the color is accurate so that we're not looking at a green tomato that's looks
Yeah.
or something, you know, like
It's very important to have your color match.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
a lot of back end editing and things like that too, to make sure that the colors are accurate. And it makes a big difference too with the publishing side with printing,
Yeah.
because oranges, reds, forget about it. Like it's
Yeah.
just, it's still,
Yeah.
it's still a
Do
thing.
they do the publishers ever basically, are you the one that does all of that color correction yourself, or does the publisher also do some things in order to tweak it to look better for print?
I think some of them do stuff on the back end. I appreciate it if they do because they know their printing
Yeah.
specs
Mhm.
more than I do generally. There are some I think that kind of just go with whatever I send, which depending on how it works. But
Yeah.
yeah, but generally speaking, like I think that they kind of I'll usually send like an RGB file and they'll switch it to CMYK and adjust based off of that kind of thing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I feel like, like we know that as professionals that printing quality varies depending on what your printer is and what settings your printer is at as well. And that is so much, I think, of the education that needs to be delivered to people that are just doing portraits for families or seniors' weddings, is that when those clients try to go and print their images, a lot of times they're not using a lab that is recommended, if you will, because I send a list of labs I recommend for my
Sure.
clients that choose to order digitals and not get prints done through me. And their color can just be so off if they go to just like a drugstore down the street or, any big name retailers that just don't have these amazing printers. And there really is so much to have to do that is different when you are printing and having to keep that in mind. So I find that fascinating too, that just how that works when you are photographing for something is going to be printed, like so many copies, not just one or two copies, but what you're doing is like just I don't even know how many copies they print of cookbooks, but it's got to be thousands. Like
I think so. And it depends on like with like Natasha's Kitchen, it's been like a bestseller, New York Times bestseller 3 times in a row. So it's like hundreds of thousands of copies.
Yeah.
How fun that your photos have been distributed to so many homes. That's so fun. I'm so impressed by you, Charity. I'm fangirling right now.
Yeah, no, it's pretty fun. It's fun when you see like there was a I wouldn't say small. It was a salad book that I did, and it so happened that I'll name drop for a second.
Yes, please do.
It so happened that the author's niece or cousin, somebody that she knew, worked with Martha Stewart. And so there's a photo that she took with Martha Stewart holding the salad book for a frame, just for the author to have like this, like kind of like endorsement, but not really. Like it was just her holding the book. But it was just, it's one of those things like, oh, Martha Stewart saw my photography.
Saw it. Yeah.
Yay.
She held it in her hands.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
We're waiting for that phone call now for
I know, right? Martha Stewart has seen your work. There we go.
Yeah.
all it takes.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
I know that's the thing. I mean, really, if there's anything we've learned, it really is that, you can get discovered in ways that seem impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Thanks, Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay. So with all of this and this, you've had so many years of experience, you've done so many amazing things. Knowing what you know now, looking back, what would you do different in your career? And I don't know the answer to this, so I'm excited to find out. I've never asked you this.
Because you guys sent me this question earlier.
Yeah.
So I've been battling around trying to figure out what a good answer is. And no, I'm just kidding. I could go all across the board. So I think it kind of ties in with what we've talked about already. But then kind of whatever. It's a mix of being like finding a confidence in yourself early on, I think would change so many different things. And given that I was such a shy kid and it took me, my 20s to like kind of snap out of it a little bit. And it just takes, that just takes time. Like, right. But if I could have been a more confident 20 something, I think that I would be like pricing would be different. I would be able to like, probably have gone more places or, done more things and all this. And that's not to say that like, I love where I ended up and I love where I am. And I think that all those things come with the, the growing knowledge that you gain as you do your career. And then like, I think the one thing that I'm like, I really wish that just never even like was a thing is the comparison game on Instagram.
Yeah.
Like that to me was like such a waste of time. And the trying to get followers and trying to be friends with all the cool people and, like all these things where it's just like, it was just unnecessary time wasted. So in the sense of like, just, I'm like, but I don't want to like pang it on just like, don't compare yourself on Instagram. Like really, it's just about having the confidence to like, to know that you can beat at your own drum and and do your own thing and not worry about what other people around you are doing. So that's like the biggest takeaway of what I wish I had told my 20 something self of don't worry about it, just do your thing and it'll be fine, So because in the end that's really.
And then you'll hang out with Dave Matthews while he drinks a glass of wine.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Right.
Don't worry about it.
Just listen to him talk, it's great.
I love it so much. Nobody we've interviewed has said that as their answer. And I love that you did that because especially speaking from somebody who has literally known you for most of, our lives. Yeah. Like I feel like I always had so much confidence in you and I was like, Charity needs to be more confident, but it's always hard when you're that person. So I think that's really amazing advice. And for anybody listening, that comparison is a thief of joy. It's so true.
It's so true.
It's a trap that I think is very easy to get sucked into even now. Like I find myself, I very much now limit my social media because I just can't do it to myself. And I think that there's so much to it. But I think that, the three of us kind of lucked out in that when we started, there wasn't as much social media. And so we started maybe with a different mindset. And then now everybody that is starting has this and they don't have a choice. Like they have to be dealing with it and the workarounds that come with it. So, we
didn't even know what algorithm was whenever we, don't worry.
Exactly.
No, is that like a math term? Do I need to know that for calculus? Like that's about where I came from with it. Anyways, Charity, this has been so awesome. Thank you again for coming on. For all of our listeners and everybody watching, you can go to Charity's website at charitylyn.com. We will put all of her info, including all of her social media accounts. And I'm going to link to a couple of her cookbooks too, so you can check them out. We'll put all those in the show notes. So you can see Charity's amazing work for yourself and grab a fork like Erin wants to and just dig right in.
Except for the fit.
Except for the fit.
I know what I'm doing when we're done recording is I'm going straight to the kitchen.
I love it. Well, thank you everybody once again for joining us. We are so happy to be back after having a summer break off and to see you all. So if you love this content, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Go follow us over on Instagram. Be our friend. Don't compare us to you, but be our friend. We're here to help support you along your journey to becoming a photographer. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I have a direct line to Charity, luckily, so I can always pass along questions if anybody has anything specific that they want answered. And we will definitely be posting throughout the week for social media for her too. And so I will log on there and be a face and maybe have Charity on for a couple of Ask Me Anythings as well. So I think that'd be a fun thing to have for our social media this week with her episode. Okay, we will see you all next week with a new one. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, Photo BFFs, if you have not subscribed, do that right now so you never miss a new episode. You can also find us at theeditweekly.com where we have free resources and downloads for you to help grow your photo business.